Now with all the latest updates and stories making the headlines, it's the ITV News at 10.
The return of the Queen, the capital opens its arms. Illuminated in the evening dusk and rain, for the last time she arrives at Buckingham Palace. In the heart of her London home, her family waiting inside. She'd been borne by the RAF, then along the roads into the capital, astonishing scenes as cars were abandoned and people stood. Ending a day which began in Edinburgh sunshine as they said farewell to the Queen of Scots. Well, tonight the late Queen is at rest in the Bow Room at the Palace before the procession bearing her to her lying in state tomorrow. As the capital fills up, we'll bring you all the events of the day and look ahead too. Crowds in Belfast welcome the new King, and a meeting at Stormont with leaders there, including Sinn Féin's.
Thank you so much for the incredibly kind things that you said about me.
Well, she played a great role here in terms of reconciliation and building a peace, so it's the end of an era for sure.
Also tonight, don't darken our doors again. The Ukrainian rout of Russian forces. Raggy has the details. And treasured memories of friends and family. The Queen's godson opens his family album for a glimpse into the private world of the late Queen.
This is ITV News at 10 with Julie Etchingham.
Good evening. The longest journey on the Queen's final journey ended 2 hours ago behind the gates of Buckingham Palace, thronged with people. Tonight, her family, 2 generations, are with the late Queen after she was flown 400 miles south from one capital city to another. Not for her, a private jet from Edinburgh. It was a military plane, an RAF C-17 transporter with devoted and dutiful daughter, Princess Anne, once again accompanying her. An honour and a privilege, the Princess called it tonight. The people of Edinburgh had gently let the Queen go for the last time. The people of London drew her towards the capital during her drive from RAF Northolt, through commuter traffic, through crowded pavements and through the rain. Inside the palace tonight, the coffin rests in the Bow Room overlooking the vast gardens of the palace before being moved to the throne room in the morning. From there, the late Queen will travel in procession for the official lying in state in Westminster Hall adjoining Parliament. It will be ceremonial and, most of all, it'll be sombre.
For 24 hours, the coffin of Her late Majesty has lain at rest in St Giles Cathedral, Edinburgh. Queen Elizabeth, Queen of Scots, beginning the final journey out of her Scottish lands. Her subjects here, many thousands of them, have taken the chance to pay their last respects at whatever time of the day or night they were able. Now she returns to England to lie in state, to be laid finally to rest. The only sound, a piper's lament. While the King continues his visits to the 4 capitals of the Union, it is the Princess Royal who will accompany their mother's body. In a statement tonight, she said, "I was fortunate to share the last 24 hours of my dearest mother's life. It has been an honour and a privilege to accompany her on her final journeys." Witnessing the love and respect shown by so many on these journeys has been both humbling and uplifting. King Charles has inherited a union of 4 nations, but maintaining that union may be the greatest challenge of his reign. All 4 national capitals will have the chance to pass on their condolences to him and his family. Today's visit to Belfast, a conscious attempt to build on his mother's legacy, that being above politics gives the monarchy great moral power to bring people together. The streets lined with crowds waiting for their first glimpse of the new king. It's a testament to how much the situation has changed in Northern Ireland that a public walkabout by a monarch should provoke so few security concerns. Outside Hillsborough Castle, the King and Queen took the chance to see the thousands of bouquets of flowers left in the late Queen's memory. Inside, he was greeted by the pageantry, with which, in just a few days, we've become very familiar. But there was a significance here that went way beyond protocol. He met the province's most senior politicians, but Northern Ireland has no devolved government right now. If it had, the First Minister would be Sinn Féin's Michelle O'Neill, committed to leaving the UK and with it the monarchy.
Thank you so much for the incredibly kind things that you said about my mother.
Well, she played a great role here in terms of reconciliation and building peace, so it's the end of an era for sure.
And then from the Speaker of the Stormont Parliament, Sinn Féin's Alex Maskey, a former member of the IRA. He spoke of his respect for the King's mother.
She personally demonstrated how individual acts of positive leadership can help break down barriers and encourage reconciliation. She personally underlined that one tradition is not diminished by reaching out to show respect to another. I want to acknowledge that your own words and actions over the years have already shown that you are seized of the importance of reconciliation and are committed to playing your full part in that.
My mother felt deeply, I know, the significance of the role she herself played in bringing together those whom history had separated and in extending a hand to make possible the healing of long-held hurts. Now, with that shining example before me, and with God's help, I take up my new duties resolved to seek the welfare of all the inhabitants of Northern Ireland.
At a moment when the Good Friday Agreement is under pressure and the Northern Ireland Protocol divides both the province and Westminster, words of reconciliation are again of vital importance. This is no time for politics, but as they waited for the King's arrival at a service of reflection and thanksgiving in St Anne's Cathedral, Belfast, Liz Truss met Ireland's Taoiseach, Micheál Martin, for the first time as Prime Minister. New government, new monarch, new start, many will be hoping. The Queen spoke often of her affection for Northern Ireland. In return, they have spoken throughout today of what she achieved here.
The word which I think will be most associated with Queen Elizabeth and Ireland, North and South, is reconciliation.
As they moved towards evening in Edinburgh, a bearer party from the RAF bore their former Commander-in-Chief aboard an Air Force transport plane for the flight to Northolt in West London. the last flight home. The King's colour for the Royal Air Force lowered in salute by the Honour Guard. The lights of the state hearse shining against the deepening gloom of a London evening. Despite steady rain, thousands lined the A40 into London from west. On the other side of the road, they stopped, nose to tail, in the fast lane as the cortege came past. As they passed Marble Arch, the pavements on the western end of Oxford Street and down Park Lane were packed and silent. Memorial in front of Buckingham Palace, the crowd was dotted with hundreds of tiny lights as people lit her way home with the torches on their phones. A police motorcycle escort, their job done, stopped, heads bowed on either side. Inside the palace, her family were waiting to receive her. Children and grandchildren gathered for a last private evening before her coffin is taken in procession back into public view for the lying in state in Westminster Hall tomorrow afternoon.
James Mates watching the Queen's return, also watching too Chris, our royal editor, who is outside Buckingham Palace tonight. I mean, where to begin with some of the images that we've witnessed throughout this afternoon and this evening, Chris?
Oh, yet again today, Julie, yet more amazing images, remarkable images, historic images we've seen throughout the day. Tonight, the Queen is at home of the headquarters of the institution that she led for 70 years. Her coffin is lying at rest in the bow room of Buckingham Palace after being received here tonight by the King and other members of the royal family. It is worth pointing out, Julie, that this was a private family moment. In fact, Buckingham Palace described it as a small family gathering, and I think it is a reminder once again that this is someone's mother, someone's grandmother. And of course, tomorrow there will be a procession which will leave here at Buckingham Palace, and the King and other members of the royal family will walk up the Mall slowly behind the coffin and head towards Westminster Hall for the beginning of this lying in state, which begins at 5 p.m. tomorrow evening and goes on until 6:30 a.m. on Monday before the state funeral. And I think that is when members of the family feel like they have handed their mother's coffin over to the nation. But for now, tonight, this is all about them and their family.
And indeed, a full day of ceremony tomorrow, effectively, Chris, where the Queen is handed back to the nation.
Exactly so, and I think this will be yet more remarkable images here tomorrow along these processional streets in central London. What struck me perhaps more so, Julie, we're used to seeing crowds on these streets, and we saw them here for the Jubilee, didn't we? But actually it was both as we had in Scotland on the route from Balmoral to Edinburgh, and also in Edinburgh on the historic Royal Mile yet again today. But just look at those images. As the light fell this evening, there was the Queen's hearse just driving along the A40. People had stopped their cars yet again, standing in the rain to see it. And this hearse, we were told tonight, had been partly designed by the Queen. You will have noticed the lights inside the hearse, and that was so that she could be seen in death, just as she was in life.
Chris, thank you. So 5 days after the Queen's death, the focus of royal mourning and attention has switched to London, and preparations around the Palace and Westminster Hall are almost complete for her transfer there tomorrow for the 4 days lying in state.
Undeterred by dark or rain, people waited for this moment to ensure this royal homecoming of the Queen's coffin to her capital, her home, would not be a lonely one.
It's so emotional, it's so moving, it's so touching, you know, and I'm glad I was here to see things for myself, to see history being done.
It was nice the way they did it, you know, everything's so dignified, isn't it?
Really lovely,
Everything.
as she deserves.
Throughout the day, a river of people flowed in and around Buckingham Palace. In Green Park, every tree garlanded with flowers, as though nature itself had sprung into bloom for the Queen. The emotion taking some by surprise.
It's made me more emotional, but seeing the amount of people in the station, everyone's talking about it, just on everybody's lips, it's just, you knew that it was going to be big. I didn't expect this emotion.
Little Lottie has brought her own special picture for the Queen.
This is the Queen. It has a starry hour and a star for being good Queen.
She was a good Queen, wasn't she?
Yeah.
Ahead of the lying in state tomorrow, the Queen's coffin will be taken from Buckingham Palace at 2:22 p.m. in a procession down the Mall, followed by the King, his brothers and sister, and Princes William and Harry. Across Horse Guards Parade, past Downing Street and the Cenotaph, arriving at Westminster Hall at 3 p.m. Those right at the start of the queue are bedding in for a very long wait. Marion, one of those who'll sleep out tonight.
Yeah, my family said, no, you're crazy, you know. They're not, you know, I don't want to miss it.
Bring it on, is what I say. You know, I am absolutely not fazed by it at all. This woman means so much to me that it's the least I can do.
The assumption is that up to 750,000 people could want to come and see the lying in state in person, joining the hardy souls who are already queuing. Some may well have been put off by the warnings of waits of up to 35 hours. But even if only half that number come, it would still mean queues snaking the length of the South Bank behind me here, past some of London's most famous landmarks, onto this bridge, into Westminster, and finally into the hushed atmosphere of the historic Westminster Hall.
Over the coming days, we'll have our last chance to bid goodbye to the Queen in person, and many don't intend to miss it. Romilly Weeks, News at 10.
Well, in the last hour, more details have been issued about how to queue for anyone hoping to see the Queen's lying in state. Starting at the Palace of Westminster, that queue could stretch for as long as 5 miles before it reaches its official endpoint. It'll wind along the south bank of the River Thames and will pass landmarks including the London Eye and HMS Belfast before it reaches its endpoint in Southwark Park. Plans have also been announced for a separate, shorter, accessible route for those with mobility issues. Well, Ben is with the early queuers already waiting patiently in the gloom and I think probably the rain still, Ben, tonight. What preparations are being put in place there?
Well, security staff and volunteers are down here tonight making hot drinks for those people who are already in the queue ahead of what promises to be really a very wet and uncomfortable night ahead. These are the hardy first few of what is likely to be hundreds of thousands of people joining this queue over the next few days. It presents an enormous logistical challenge and people are being urged to really check government advice and think very carefully before making the commitment to come down here. It will be a system of numbered wristbands, we're told tonight, for those who join the queue. That will allow them to keep their place if they want to duck out for a comfort break or to get refreshments. Cafes, museums, galleries along the route will be open for longer hours so that people can use their facilities. Community halls, we're told, will be serving tea and coffee, and there will be 1,000 dedicated helpers, including volunteers from the Samaritans, the Salvation Army, as well as police officers to support people and of course to keep them safe, as what is likely to be the biggest policing and security operation the capital has ever seen really ramps up tomorrow, with so many people gathered in one place and perhaps millions coming into the capital in the coming days.
It's quite a thought, isn't it, Ben? Thank you very much indeed for that. Well, the coffin of the late Queen left Edinburgh in the late afternoon sunshine, where since Sunday people there had set the tone for how the life of the Queen should be remembered and honoured. 33,000 passed by the Queen's coffin in those 24 hours it was on view in St Giles Cathedral. Some had queued for 12 of those hours. However long they'd waited, though, they said that it was an honour.
As dawn's first light broke through the stained glass in St Giles Cathedral, thousands were still waiting patiently. But what's a few hours in a queue for a monarch who gave 70 years of service?
If it happened in England, I wouldn't have been able to be there, but it's happened in Scotland, and in a nutshell, that's why I'm here today. I was raised as a royalist. It's the love that I have for the country.
This has been the Queen's final day in Scotland, one last chance for the people of this nation to pay their respects.
I never had much to do with the royals because I always felt they were English, but over the few weeks I've realised, no, she's been more Scottish and more into people in Scotland.
Having waited since 4 o'clock this morning, Tracy and David reached the front. She gave a bow and wiped a tear from her eye.
I'm ex-forces myself, so I've actually served for her. And yes, I'm very glad that we actually got the chance.
And that's why you were so determined?
Yeah.
You queued for 12 hours?
Yes.
And when you reached the front, what was going through your mind?
Just feeling very sad.
You were very emotional about this?
No, because I had the chance to see the Queen the last time.
The last monarch to die in Scotland was in 1542, King James V, and it was his crown on top of the Queen's coffin. History in Our Times, and historian David Torrance in red at the top of the screen came to experience it.
Very Scottish. The Royal Standard of Scotland draped over the Queen's coffin, the Royal Company of Archers standing guard with heads bowed.
You have just lived through history. Did it feel like that when you were there?
It did feel significant, yeah. It means that this accession, when it's written up by future historians, Scotland will feature more prominently than at any time since the 16th century.
30,000 people passed through St Giles Cathedral in under 24 hours. Thousands more had to be turned away.
This is literally the end, so
we got very lucky.
Yeah, we're really lucky. So it'll be really good. Hopefully we'll get in to see her.
They did make it, the last members of the public in Scotland to see the Queen here.
How lucky we were as the last people, and now, you know, the doors are closed and she's going down to London, so we really...
Yeah, leaving her beloved Scotland for the last time.
In the last few days, Scotland has played its part. Now the Scottish people have said their final farewell to a Queen who so loved her time here. Peter Smith, News at 10, Edinburgh.
There was, as we saw earlier, no doubting the warmth of the welcome for King Charles from the thousands of people who turned out to see him in Belfast on his King's tour. History and political allegiances have the potential, of course, to make Northern Ireland a tricky place for a new monarch because of the undercurrent of tension between Unionists and Nationalists. The King lost his own much-loved great-uncle, Lord Mountbatten, to an IRA bombing.
When the King flies in, classes stop. Whether in the sky or indeed on the ground, royalty get a window seat from which to wave at those who come to welcome them. And for the lucky few, there was a chance today to meet the new King.
Pleasure to meet you.
A fleeting opportunity, but not one to be wasted.
Talked to us a little bit about the challenge of finding volunteers, so he really understands and got it, and yeah, it was lovely.
So in that brief moment, you managed to cover off a little bit of an issue there.
Yeah.
You still need more scouts, right?
More scouts and more leaders.
And more leaders, okay.
And the King understood, so yeah, it was lovely.
That's a win.
Yeah.
And I actually said to Queen Consort Camilla that I'm sure she's exhausted. She said it's the heels that's getting her the most.
The heels. Okay, so
her feet are tired more
day
than
after
anything.
day.
Yeah.
Well, that's an interesting insight into her. Into her
It's a
world.
woman-to-woman comment.
Yes.
So this is now a new era, so we're behind him 100%.
But there are many who see it differently. The passing of a watchful monarch, a head of state, is a reminder of subservience to a nation they do not wish to be a part of, highlighting the divisions that reach back generations. To understand Charles's role in Northern Ireland means travelling to the Republic of Ireland and the scene of one of the now King's darkest days. The IRA killed his great-uncle Lord Mountbatten. Charles later described him as the grandfather he never had. Peter McHugh was a witness to the bombing, helping to pull casualties out of the water. He believes that King Charles's emotional attachment to the North and the South is invaluable. He must have placed value on this island of Ireland.
I don't think there's any doubt about that. I don't think there's a shadow of a doubt, but that he has a special regard for Ireland, and he's made that quite clear.
Back on the other side of the border and a contrasting perspective. In the Republican areas, history records the people's struggle against a union they do not want. The peace process changed this landscape for the better. That's not to say the struggle for those who want a united Ireland is over. Eamon McCann lives on the Bogside in Londonderry. Opposed to monarchy, he'd like to see a socialist Ireland. Do you welcome?
Oh, I absolutely do not welcome King Charles III to the Bogside or to Derry, and indeed I wouldn't welcome King Charles to anywhere in the world. I'm against monarchy. I think they represent, the monarchy is at the apex of a divided and grotesquely unfair system.
And the monarchy plays a role in symbolically powerful moments. When the Queen visited Dublin and spoke in Irish, then President Mary McAleese could be seen to say wow. A year later, she briefly shook hands with former IRA leader and Republican politician Mark Guinness. Now, a new monarch and a new start. His job to represent all his subjects, whether they support him or not, and for as long as he reigns. Rupert Evelyn, News at 10, Belfast.
At the big ceremonial events of the past few days, thus far, there have been barely any protests against the monarchy, but there have been accusations of heavy-handed policing when some of those who've made their feelings clear have been arrested by the police. One man arrested in Oxford after shouting out who elected him during the proclamation about the new King's reign said when he was dragged away by the police, it felt like slipping back into the 16th century.
Just outside St Giles's Cathedral, alongside the silent mourners queuing to see the Queen's coffin, another line of people stood quietly. Holding a blank sheet and pieces of paper, protesters in Edinburgh united not in grief, but in defence of freedom of speech.
Clearly, the police have said it's not okay to say anything against the monarchy at this time. And, if it's not acceptable at this time, when is it?
We shouldn't have to be arrested, but we should be able to say what we want.
It follows a number of arrests of anti-monarchy protesters at ceremonial events. The Duke of York was heckled as he followed his mother's coffin up the Royal Mile with his brothers and sister. Bystanders dragged a man from the front who was arrested and today charged with breach of the peace. It was an overreaction, says Simon, who stands by his own protest and subsequent arrest on Sunday.
I called out who elected him when the proclamation of Charles as our rightful
And would that
lord
have
and king.
disrupted what was going on over here?
I'd be very...
3 cheers for King Charles III!
Hundreds had gathered in Oxford to hear the proclamation of the new king, something Simon strongly objects to.
I wasn't aggressive, I wasn't personally offensive to them or to Charles. I'm not interested in attacking anyone personally. I responded by saying, head of state's being imposed without our consent. We shouldn't be bowing down to another human being.
Was it the time, though? You were interrupting people who were mourning. They're one and the same, aren't they? Mourning the Queen and proclaiming the new king?
I wasn't interrupting any act of mourning, and I'd never do that. Of course, people want to mourn the sad death of Elizabeth last week.
Many don't see it that way, though, and for the police, it's about ensuring safety for the wider public.
What we need to do is get the balance right between people who are mourning, paying respect to Her Majesty the Queen, and people who may have a different point of view. You can intervene in a protest if you believe there's going to be a breach of the peace. Ironically, it's the Queen's peace, now the King's peace, or if you believe it's threatening, abusive or insulting.
As our streets fill with thousands of mourners over the next few days, emotions on both sides will run high. How the police manage them will be judged like never before. Emily Morgan, News at 10.
The Centre Parks holiday resorts have come up with a novel and, judging by the response, unpopular way of marking the Queen's funeral next Monday by telling its guests to leave its sites for 24 hours. The company said it made the decision as a mark of respect and to allow staff to be part of the historic moment. Centre Parks promised to explain the options available for guests, which include refunds. Now to the Ukrainian counter-offensive against the Russian invasion. Ukraine's Deputy Foreign Minister says their troops aim to liberate all the areas captured by Russia. In the past 24 hours, the area recaptured by Ukrainian forces has, according to President Zelensky, doubled. Well, Raggy, our Foreign Affairs editor's here. And really just to bring us up to speed with the latest in the last 24 hours, because we get astonishing image on top of astonishing image out of Ukraine at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, since Her Majesty the Queen passed away on Thursday, the Ukrainian offensive began, and they captured 1,000 square kilometres on that day. Today, that's increased to 6,000 square kilometres. It's a lightning speed advance in the north and the east, where the Russians had embedded since their invasion began in February. That's due to several factors, you know, Western munitions and armaments having gone in, but also coordination between America and Britain over the summer, in which Ukrainians wanted to pin the Russians down against a counteroffensive for when the autumn came. And that's proved amazingly successful. The US government has said that Ukraine's progress has been significant. Russia has said that they are regrouping, although all over social media there is significant pictures of Russian POWs being captured by Ukrainians left and right over towns and villages over the north and east. And it looks like it's not stopping at all. And I would say, Julie, that one of the things that on Monday, when the Queen is laid to rest, is that despite our support of Ukraine, the Russian ambassador in London will attend the Queen's funeral on Monday. So diplomacy and protocol continues despite our support of Ukraine.
OK, Raggy, thank you very much indeed. Now, an MP who broke COVID rules by taking the train from London to Glasgow after testing positive has been punished with a 270-hour community payback order. Margaret Ferrier, who is an SNP MP at the time, travelled to London and spoke in the Commons in September 2020, despite having a cough and waiting for her test results. After her positive result, she took a train home to Glasgow. Now, the pull of family was an intense one for the Queen, as we've heard so many times in these past days. But she also liked to relax with her friends and be her private self. Her godson, the Earl of Carnarvon, has witnessed that ever since he was born. His father was the Queen's famous racing manager known as Porchy. That's how the families became friends. I went to meet Lord and Lady Carnarvon at their home, Highclere Castle, which anyone who enjoys Downton Abbey will recognise.
Highclere is a world apart, and it's somewhere the Queen could come and visit and get away from it all.
So these are rooms that are very familiar to the Queen. She would have felt at home here, would have been relaxing. What was it like?
Well, it would have been tea later on after shooting, always in the same place in here. There'd have been a cocktail before dinner, maybe in the drawing room. Oh, Dubonnet, yes, Dubonnet.
Dubonnet and gin.
Yes, absolutely.
Very nice. But somewhere where she could let the shoulders drop and feel amongst friends and fun.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
And some lovely memories here. What can we see here on this table?
Well, this here is Majesty had my father's azalea rhododendron collection there in the spring in May, which is always a time to come to have a look at the horses. That's actually racing with a race program.
That's one of those images that feels quite familiar because you know that her face is always going to be lit up on those occasions.
Well, absolutely. There must. I'm not whether looking at one of her own horses or my father. She was always a brilliant supporter of other people's horses too, if she knew the owner. To be fair.
And just utterly relaxed, at home in the countryside.
This is I think at Polehampton with her cattle. Yeah. Mm.
Great host of memories that you've collected here, not just amongst the walls and in your own minds, but great historical record, really, of the times when she relaxed.
Absolutely, yeah.
Just remind us of the relationship between your family's history and the Queen's and the friendships that grew out of it.
Well, I think my father first met them actually when they were both pretty young. Really, it was really we might say at a kid's party, as far as I know. But they had this great friendship from before the Second World War, and then of course many years after it, and it was this extraordinary shared interest in the thoroughbred, in racing and breeding and horses, but more than that, really in the whole countryside farming, the sort of ecosystem of the natural world and landscape, and of course with Prince Philip as well, they all shared those interests.
And to have such enduring friendships through so many decades of service must have meant the world to the Queen through her life.
Well, I think for someone who works so hard as the fantastic monarch we have in the UK, there's also time in one's life for some normal friendships and time out and being in a world of particular interest rather in affairs of state. And I think my father was part of that side of her world, really.
I mean, that moment when you realise that you've got such a special connection to the Queen as a godchild must be quite something. I mean, that moment when you must have actually, as a boy, looked up and thought, "Goodness, this is pretty special."
Though she was, I can still remember on my around the time of my confirmation, and it was my birthday, and she sent me an amazing little camera at the time, which I used for many years.
Oh, so quite personal gifts.
Yes,
as
it
well.
was. Yeah, she was brilliant at remembering that kind of thing, which was for her with all these godchildren was quite a thing, really.
But to still nurture all of those personal connections when there are so many. I mean, she has her immediate family is pretty large now, isn't it? But still have that connection with godchildren is very.
I think for anyone who was lucky enough to be around the Queen and Prince Philip at a weekend somewhere, everyone who was there, no one was ever felt they were left out. There was always a drawing in of people and getting people together and meeting new people and having amazingly interesting conversations at dinner. But I think anyone who meets the Queen at a gathering, if you have an honour and you're at Buckingham Palace or at Windsor, they always come away saying they had a great conversation with her, even if it was only for a short time.
And Lady Carnarvon, how did you sort of fit in? Because actually marrying into a situation in which the Queen may be coming for the weekend, or you were invited into a social situation with Her Majesty the Queen. How did you find it, and how did you navigate it?
Well, I didn't expect it to start with, or assume that I would necessarily be asked. I appreciated it was a friendship between my parents-in-law and Geordie with the Queen. So I didn't actually think about it in advance, and the first time I met the Queen was for supper, and I think Geordie had simply said to me on a Friday morning, "We're going up to have supper with my parents at Milford and the Queen's going to be there." And I think I said, "What shall I wear?" Which is the first thing any woman says. But it was a relaxed, informal Friday night supper. So, and it was perhaps for me slightly surreal walking into a room and there were 5 people there. So that was incredibly special and a tremendous honour. And for my part, I've just always tried not to get something wrong. I'm here by sort of associated invitation, in a sense. And she was always very kind and very welcoming, but I felt it was a sort of passed on honour, so I just didn't want to put my foot in it, I suppose. So this goes back to the 6th Earl of Carnarvon with, I think, Princess Elizabeth, Princess Margaret, Prince Philip and my pa-in-law going to Highclere Church. So it was the same church where there's another photograph of the Queen holding Geordie as a baby. There's some lovely photographs I found in this one of sort of behind the scenes at Balmoral, Princess Anne and Prince Charles upside down in a ditch. And
These are real behind-the-scenes shots. So Princess Anne
is the star.
Is the star.
And again, it's those just happy moments, and the Queen laughing here at Princess Anne, and not exactly sure what's going on.
So this is absolutely, quintessentially downtime for everybody.
Photos.
Family pictures like everybody's got in a book.
And this is just magic. It's Princess Anne. I think she's dancing, the Scottish dancers on the top there. And I found in here quite a fun photograph again on this side here, and I thought the photograph prophet there was really lovely, funnily enough. Just happy smiles. Yeah. And then Prince Philip there, it's just a wonderful photograph of a happy man. And that's lovely again. I think that's this really charming photograph of two sisters together.
And the sort of mischief in it, and the just the warmth and the love of the two of them. So you were also fortunate, you talked about being at Balmoral and Sandringham, but just seeing the whole family in the mix with Her Majesty at the centre must have given you a really acute sense of the dynamics of the whole family.
Well, they were always very kind to me as a small boy, and Prince Charles was always incredibly friendly, and Princess Anne. So I mean, it was great to be amongst them all, really.
You know, the sad aspects of great longevity is that, you know, you realise that you lose very many people that you love along the way when you reach a grand age. And that's certainly true of Her Majesty, isn't it? I mean, how has she navigated the hard times, whether it's bereavement or, I mean, the very public difficulties that sometimes the family has endured? How?
Well, she has this great faith as a centre of anchoring everything, and of course, up until sadly very recently, we were always with Prince Philip was the most enormous support, and I also think quite a close group of fairly amazing, loyal friends, and even friends who are more, you know, courteous employees, even who have stood for many years very, very close to Her Majesty and been an enormous support.
So that's made a difference.
It has absolutely made a difference.
And what would you say to that, Lady Carnarvon?
I think again it's her faith and that still small voice of calm.
What a lovely thought. Thank you both very much indeed. Thank you. And letters to the Queen were always answered, and it seems right up until her death. So much so, replies from her or from her office that were written just before she died have still been arriving.
Happy birthday to you.
There hasn't been an awful lot to celebrate, but Joan Shearburn and her family have a very good reason to be cheerful. Today, she celebrated her 100th birthday, and among the many well wishes, there's one in particular that's taken pride of place.
I had this lovely card, beautiful card of the Queen, dressed all in blue, and she looked lovely, beautiful. Suddenly she died.
A shock for us all, and now we know that Joan's card is one of the last ones sent before Her Majesty's death.
When I opened it, I was thrilled. What a lovely card.
Millie Francis also received a special delivery last week. She wrote to the Queen to congratulate her on her Platinum Jubilee and says she'll now treasure the reply even more.
It makes us feel like I've got something special, especially because the Queen has passed away, sadly. It's like, that's like really special and really caring, so you've got to really look after that letter.
And across the Commonwealth, the final few wishes from Her Majesty have been dropping into letterboxes. In Australia, Olivia Akers received a response to a letter she wrote in the summer.
When I heard the news about the Queen, I thought I wasn't going to get the letter, but I did.
Yeah, we live in a small rural town with a population of about 700 people, and I went to the post office that very morning and said, "Oh, are there any parcels today?" And the lady said, "Oh no, there's no parcels, but you do have a very, very special letter."
And after sending a card to the Queen, Barack Davison opened his reply the day after her death.
It's like a gift from heaven, and receiving this letter, it means a lot to me, and it's something really special.
Buckingham Palace says congratulatory messages are paused at the moment and applications are not currently being processed. So Joan celebrates this evening as one of a small few, made to feel even more special by the Queen, even after her passing. Stacey Foster, News at 10.
And that is almost it for tonight. On the night the late Queen lies at rest in Buckingham Palace, welcomed home by her children and grandchildren. The gates of the palace opened just after 8 o'clock to receive the hearse and the coffin of the late sovereign. In life, the Queen had not spent a night at the palace since March 2020, when lockdown took her to Windsor. In death, she has returned for one last time. Since before her father's coronation, the palace and its balcony have been the axis around which royal events like the Queen's own wedding and national celebrations have revolved and evolved. For 70 years as monarch, as mother and grandmother, the Queen has always been there. The next time those balcony doors are thrown open and the royal family hove into view, one small but mesmerising figure will be missing. From all of us, good night.
Hello again. So the rain across the south will eventually move out of the way on Wednesday, and for most of us, give or take the odd shower across eastern parts, it is looking largely dry across the UK. Bright or sunny spells, but it will be feeling a little fresher. Now for the rest of tonight, still some outbreaks of rain across southern parts of Wales and southern England. Could be heavy, possibly even thundery in places, and quite a muggy feel here. Elsewhere though, give or take the odd shower, largely dry, clear skies and feeling fresher. So this is how we start things on Wednesday morning. We've still got this rain lingering across the south, but eventually it will move out of the way. And for most of us, as we go through Wednesday, it's not looking too bad. Now there's still a chance of the odd shower across parts of Northern Ireland and northern Scotland, but for most, fine and dry as we go through the afternoon. Bright or sunny spells, and we're looking at highs there of 23 degrees in the south.
Good evening, welcome to Granada Reports. It's been confirmed trains will run through the night and some roadworks will be lifted for people who want to pay their respects to the late Queen ahead of her funeral on Monday. Her hearse has now arrived at Buckingham Palace as more people in the northwest share their memories of our longest reigning monarch. Jennifer Buck has our report.
A moment of reflection and remembrance, marked by music. Blackpool Tower Ballroom has played host to many famous faces, but today those who remember the Queen's visit were sharing special memories. Phil Kelsall has been organist here for 45 years, and he enjoyed a quiet moment with the Queen during her visit for the Tower's centenary year.
I could see she was really impressed with the room, who wouldn't be? And then she came over to me and she said, what happens here normally? So I had to explain we have non-stop ballroom dancing, ma'am, and you can dance all day long if you wish, and she was very impressed.
Tom Kellett described it as an honour, as it was his job in 1994 to escort the Queen to the top of the tower.
As soon as I closed the lift doors, it was absolutely magic. The Queen, she just smiled at me and she just made me feel so at ease.
Today the Queen's journey is from Edinburgh to London as the capital prepares for Her Majesty to lie in state. Earlier today people queued for hours to pay their last respects. Joe Williams made the trip from Manchester to Edinburgh.
And there was just a sense of calm and silence, and it was nice to see how dignified she is laid at rest.
Overwhelming still for so many across the country and the Commonwealth. Today the African Caribbean Care Group gathered in Manchester.
She was the head of state for us, especially when we were going through a rough time with the volcanic eruption. She was there, she sent supplies, and she did a great deal. She never let us down.
The Queen is our boss lady in Hong Kong in the past, and everybody
show respect on her.
The Queen, as head of state, she's been my sovereign all my years that I've been born, and felt that I still have that allegiance, and I feel that, you know, the saddened loss of her passing.
Jennifer Buck, ITV News.
All police forces across the northwest will send officers to the capital to support the policing operation as Queen Elizabeth lies in state. The exact number hasn't been disclosed for operational reasons. Monday's funeral is the UK's biggest security operation since the London Olympics back in 2012. Earlier this evening, a special requiem mass was held at the Catholic Cathedral in Liverpool. People came together to pay their own tributes. The Archbishop of Liverpool led the service.
The feelings that we've been experiencing here, I think, and throughout the nation, I think, is the one of grief, but of that emotion which comes from when we lose a parent, or a close relative, you know. And so the Queen's death, because in many respects she was like a mother to us all, particularly in recent decades, and has brought back a lot of these memories. People are able to come to places like our cathedrals, sit quietly, and to deal with those memories and that emotion, and hopefully go away comforted.
Next tonight to the extraordinary invitation from Queen Elizabeth to the hostage Terry Waite after he spent almost 5 years in captivity. The former envoy, who's from Bollington in Cheshire, was invited to stay in Balmoral after his release, but kept that a secret